Many of you taking this Nugget series are planning to take the PMP exam and become certified PMP. Project Management Professional. The PMP exam, the certification for Project Management Professional, is done by a not-for-profit organization called PMI. PMI has gone to great lengths to ensure that people taking and passing the PMP exam, becoming certified PMPs, are truly qualified practitioners of project management, have actual application knowledge of project management in the field. In this Nugget series, we'll talk about the PMP exam, and we'll walk you through the processes for how to prepare for and eventually pass your PMP. Before you can even consider taking the exam, you must ensure you meet the qualifications. There are rigorous qualifications that must be satisfied before you can even be deemed eligible to take the exam. The qualifications are different if you have an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree versus high school education only. Later in this nugget, we will review the details of the qualifications based on the two criteria. If you meet the qualifications, if you have the practical experience in project management that meets the qualifications, then you can prepare for and submit your application for the PMP. Assuming you meet the qualifications and you're approved, you will then need to know the format for the exam. The current PMP exam has 200 questions on it, but only 175 of the total questions are scored, or at least scored from the viewpoint of determining if you qualify for the PMP exam. The remaining 25 are test questions, if I can use that term. Test questions from the viewpoint of PMI have developed new questions for the exam, and they will be scattering them through the exam and determining if these are appropriate questions based on the success of candidates on these 25 questions. You won't know which of the questions are quote-unquote test questions and which are scored questions, so do your best and ensure that you're getting the right answers for all 200 questions. A passing grade says you need to get 106 right of the 175. And again, you don't know which are the 25 test evaluation questions and which are the true scored questions. If you're more interested in the math, that says you need to get 61% of all of the questions right, or all of the scored questions. Probably the simplest way to look at it is say, I need to get 61% of all of the questions right, and not get hung up on whether this might be a test question or whether this is a scored question. But the passing grade, as determined by PMI, is 106 of the 175 scored questions must be right for you to get your PMP. The PMP is a yes or a no, pass or no pass situation. A score of 99 is as good as a score of 61. A score of 60, however, is a failing grade, and you will not get your PMP. The format for the quiz itself is multiple choice. Each question will have 4 possible answers. It's going to be your job to review each of the questions, each of the possible answers, and select the most appropriate answer. And again, we'll talk more about the strategy for selecting the right answer to each of the questions later in this nugget. But the main way to pass, obviously, is to know your material. The PMP exam itself is going to test you in 2 areas. It's going to test you on knowledge. How well do you understand the principles of project management, as defined in the PMBOK guide and as described in this Nugget series? It's also going to test you on application. A significant number of the questions on the PMP exam are going to be application. It's not going to be, according to the PMBOK guide, which of the 3 are. It's going to be, in a given scenario, what would be your chosen strategy? How would you deal with this? So again, In order to qualify and pass the project management exam, you need to meet the qualifications, you need to know the material, and you need to get 61% or 106 of the 175 scored questions correct.
Before you will be granted permission to take the exam, you must apply and be accepted. You must meet the qualifications. The qualifications vary. If you have an undergraduate degree as a minimum, or if you don't have an undergraduate degree. If you have an undergraduate degree, you must have a minimum of 4,500 hours experience in the project management field. And that experience must have taken place within the last 6 years. Without a degree, the number is higher. Without a degree, you must have a minimum of 7,500 hours experience in the project management field, and that experience must have taken place within the last 8 years. What is experience? Does that mean you had to be a formal project manager, actively, directly managing a project for the 4,500 or the 7,500 hours? No, but it must be you have been involved in a project in some capacity where you have been involved in the project management area. So you may not have been the direct project manager, you may have been a team lead, or you may have had a team member who has some responsibility, some involvement in the project management processes itself. You will be required to list the dates and the times, i.e. the hours, of the experiences, and you must break your experiences down as to what element was in initiating, what was in planning, or how many hours was in initiating, how many hours were in planning, how many hours were in monitoring, in executing, and in closing. And these experience hours must be verifiable. The PMI Certification Board, the people who process your application, will check some applications and make phone calls to validate that the dates and times listed are appropriate, that in fact you do have the appropriate number of hours, whether you have a degree or not on a degree. So, fairly comprehensive, fairly extensive expectations on you having met the qualifications, fairly extensive expectations on ensuring that you have involvement in the project management field, that you in fact do have subject matter expertise, that you understand the application of project management before you will meet the qualifications to take the exam. The last component for qualification is you must have attended some formal project management education. In both instances, with or without the degree,
you must have 35 hours of formal project management training to meet this requirement. Self-study is not considered to be formal project management training.
If you don't meet these qualifications, you do not need to apply for the PMP exam because you will not be granted eligibility to take the exam. One last component of meeting the qualifications, you must agree to the PMI Code of Conduct. We have another nugget later in this series on project management professionalism, which will explain in more detail what the PMI Code of Conduct is all about. You want more information on the qualifications? Go to pmi.org. Click on the PMP, and there's a downloadable PDF file that will give you full details of what the expectations are, what the qualifications are for getting approval to write the PMP. And again, you must ensure you are meeting the appropriate qualifications. You must ensure your qualifications are verifiable, because they will be verified in some instances. And when you meet these qualifications and you submit the appropriate funds, there is a fee for taken the PMP exam. I'm not going to list the fee as the fee changes with time. Again, you can get the current fee structure from www.pmi.org. So you meet the qualifications, you agree to the code of conduct, and you provide the appropriate fee, and you will be granted permission to take the exam.
As mentioned, the exam will have 200 multiple choice questions. 25 are evaluation questions. 175 are scored. You will not know which are the evaluation questions and which are the scored questions. So I would recommend you lose sight of the fact that there are 25 evaluation questions and focus on the fact that there are 200 questions on the exam. The exam is a computer-driven exam. You will go to a test center. There are different test centers in different locations around the world. You will need to go to the PMI website to find the test center that's nearest to you. Go to the test center and you will be logged on to a computer and you will take the exam via computer-driven delivery method. 200 multiple choice questions. There are 4 possible answers per question. In most instances, there are 4 separate questions. You will have some instances where option D will be none of the above or all of the above, but in most instances you're going to get 4 separate independent answers, and you need to select the most appropriate answer of the 4. Things you've heard in the past that says the second answer is always the right answer, or the second answer is always the right one, or the longest answer is always the right one. Ignore all of the folklore, all of the myths around multiple choice questions. The PMP questions are professionally developed, professionally delivered, and they are developed specifically to try to keep a level playing field. They have focused on keeping the length of each of the answers as close to the same as possible. The position of their answers are randomly distributed throughout the question. So there is no tricks, there are no principles that you would never apply to multiple choice questions that you want to take forward into your PMP. Look for the best answer, look for the most appropriate answer, and the key is look for the best, look for the most appropriate, because there may in fact be more than one right answer, but one of the answers is more appropriate, more correct, if I can use that term, than the others. The exam is designed to test your knowledge of project management in multiple areas. It's designed to test your actual knowledge, the book knowledge, if I can use that term. According to the PMBOK guide, these are the ABCs. So there will be some direct questions that are literally definition type questions that's going to test your book knowledge. There will be application type questions, situational specific. Given this scenario, how would you respond? Given this scenario, what would be the most appropriate strategy for a project manager to apply? So be prepared for application type situations and be prepared for analysis type questions. You will need to have pencil and paper. Again, check the PMI website. The current process is you're allowed to take nothing into the exam room. The exam site itself will give you the pencils, the papers that you need to do your calculations. But be prepared to do analysis. You will have to literally roll up your sleeves, get out the pencil, get out the paper, and do some simple analysis to determine what the most appropriate answer to some of the questions are going to be. Be prepared for the exam. 200 multiple choice. You must score 61% to pass the exam. And I'm just going to stick with the 61%. Realizing that that actually means 106 of the 175 scored answers, but not knowing which are the scored answers and which are the unscored answers, you need to make 61% to get the exam pass. Multiple choice questions, 4 answers per, and designed to test total knowledge of project management. Book knowledge, applicational knowledge, analysis of given scenarios.
The key to passing the exam, of course, is to know your material. You need to be aware that the exam is going to cover all the knowledge areas. In terms of breakdown for the exam is generally considered, and remember, every exam is unique, but the exam database is designed to give you this approximate percentage of coverage. So initiating will be approximately 10% of the total number of questions on the exam. Planning will be approximately 25%. Executing will be approximately 25%. And controlling will be approximately 25%. So if you need to focus your attention, where the majority of the questions are going to be, and that, of course, is in the core of the project management areas: planning, executing, and controlling. Closing will be another 10%, and potentially a surprise if you're not familiar with the PMP process. There's 15 or approximately 15% of the questions related to professionalism. What is professionalism? Project management professional. It's a PMP. There will be questions on how well you can apply professionalism in the project management discipline. We talked about you will be required to sign off and agree to the PMI Code of Conduct as part of taking the PMP exam. You will actually be tested on that Code of Conduct in these questions related to professionalism. We have a nugget later in this series that deals specifically with professionalism. And for those of you doing the math, yes, I know this does not add up to 100%. This adds up to a little over 100%. Approximately 10%, approximately 25%, and so on, is how the coverage of the exam questions will be. 2 areas I believe you need to be specifically aware of: earned value. There will be a number of questions on the exam specifically related to the application of, the calculation of, and the definition of earned value. If earned value is not a high level of comfort, a high level of knowledge area for you, and I suspect many of you taking this exam will not be very familiar with, and maybe not even have heard specifically about, earned value analysis, you need to prepare for earned value questions. And again, we have a nugget in this series specifically related to earned value. Another specific area that many of you may be unfamiliar with is specific network analysis questions. How do you calculate, how do you develop, how do you analyze a project network? We're probably all very familiar with tasks and task dependencies, predecessor-successor relationships. Network analysis goes beyond that. It accepts that, but it brings in effort. It talks about early starts and early finishes and slack. You need to be aware of the entire network analysis process, how to calculate it, how to analyze it. And again, we have a specific nugget later in the series dedicated to network analysis. To pass the exam, you need to know your material. It is going to test your knowledge of the material, your book learnedness. It's going to test your application, how do you apply, and a lot of the applications are going to be in project professionalism, but they will be also scattered through the entire area of the exam. Testing your application. If you were a project manager given this situation, how would you do? And finally, it's going to test your ability to analyze, analysis on the information provided. So you're ready for the exam. It's the day of the exam. What do you need to do? What do you need to do to be prepared? You need to bring your eligibility letter with you. You're not going to be admitted to the exam center without your eligibility letter. You need to bring 2 pieces of ID. At least one of those pieces of ID must be a picture ID to ensure that you are in fact the person who received the eligibility letter. The names on your IDs must match the name on the eligibility letter. And that's about it. You can bring a non-programmable calculator. You cannot bring any books. You cannot bring any papers. You cannot bring answers written on your arms. No, I'm just kidding on that. You cannot bring any other study aids. The test center will give you 2 pieces of paper. You can bring your own pencil and pen. And that's it. You are basically going into the exam center with nothing but the clothing on your back and your non-programmable calculator. The knowledge must be in your head. As the exam is relatively lengthy, up to 4 hours, I would strongly encourage you to bring some kind of snacks, some kind of water, so that you can take a break. But when you take a break, the clock doesn't stop. When you take a break for your snacks, to do a brain refresh, which I highly recommend, to have a drink of water, the 4.5-hour clock is still running. So be aware of that. And because you have no idea what the temperature is going to be in the exam center, I would absolutely suggest you dress in layers. If it's hot, you can take off a layer. If it's cold, you can keep the layers on. Be prepared, and I would say overall, you need to be relaxed. You've done your homework. You've done your study. You've taken this nugget series. You're an experienced project manager. I'm sure you'll do well. Be ready, be prepared, and be relaxed, and I'm sure you'll do your best. Final words of advice I have for you for the PMP are in the form of these tips and hints. First thing, when you sit down in the exam center, use the paper provided. If there's anything you're not aware of, if you're not sure you're going to remember the terms for earned value, take your paper, take your pencil, write them out while it's still fresh in your mind. EV equals earned value. AC equals BC equals. Write out the terms, the pieces of information that you think you're likely to forget. Get them on paper while your brain is fresh. Then you can go back and review them. As discussed throughout this nugget, memorization is not enough. If all you've done is memorize the PMBOK, you're probably not going to get a passing grade on the PMP. You need to understand the application. You need to be prepared to do the analysis. First thing, you need to build up your confidence. The exam allows you to skip questions. The exam allows you to mark questions to come back for later review. So if the first question or the 5th question is a hard question and you don't have an obvious answer, mark it for later review, skip it, and come back to it. Do a first pass through the exam, answer all of the easy questions first, build your confidence. Once you've been through and done all the easy questions, and there's going to be lots of them, there really is, there's going to be lots of easy questions where it's intuitively obvious, you know exactly what the right answer is, get them done. Then go back and look at the harder ones. And I think you'll surprise yourself. You're going to have probably pretty close to a passing grade on your first pass as you answer the easy questions. Now you've got your confidence. Now it's time to go back and start to answer the harder ones. As you're answering the questions, you need to put it into context. What would I do if I was in this position? And as you're putting it into context, you need to think PMI, PMBOK. The PMBOK guide would do it this way. That's what the right answer is going to be. I've heard people refer to it as PMI-isms. You need to think PMI. You need to put the questions into context. You need to put it into an applicational, situational, specific concept. Absolutely key. Look for the best answer. There's more than one correct answer. If there's one aspect of trickiness to catch you up in the PMP exam, it's the fact that some questions, not all, but some questions are going to have more than one correct answer. But there's going to be one answer that's absolutely better than the other. And that's, again, often where the PMI-isms come into play. Sometimes it's hard to find the best answer, so first eliminate all the wrong answers. Well, it's definitely not that, and it's definitely not that. So if you can eliminate 2 out of the 4 possible answers, it's a lot easier to look for the best answer when you've eliminated the number of options you have to deal with. You have to be prepared for calculations. You will be required to do some math. You don't need a PhD in mathematics, but you need to be prepared to do some calculations. You're going to be doing some calculations around earned value. You're going to be doing some calculations around network analysis with late starts and early finishes and so on. That's why you brought your non-programmable calculator with you. For those of you international people taking this Nugget series, you need to be aware that most questions are US based. So if there's questions related to financial analysis, if there's questions specifically related to ethics, those questions are going to be based on how it would be interpreted, how would it be applied in the US. So that's something international people taking the exam need to be very aware of. Often, the correct answers are based on the general premises as proposed by PMI, proactive management. Do the right things right the first time. So as you're looking for the best answer, as you're looking for the PMI-isms, how this would be done by the PMBOK, often the correct, or maybe I should make that best answer, is based on the proactive approach. But the most important tip and hint I can give you is relax. You know your stuff. You've prepared. You've taken this Nugget series. You've reviewed and digested the PMBOK. You're an experienced project manager. You have thousands of hours of experience in project delivery. You're going to do fine.
This Nugget was focused on the PMP exam and how to prepare for it. Having completed this Nugget, you understand what the qualifications for the PMP are going to be. You know how many hours of project management experience you must have, based on whether you have a degree or you don't have a degree. You know you need 35 hours of direct project management formal education, and you know you need to accept the Project Management Code of Ethics. Again, I would encourage you to go to the PMI website and download the PDF specific to the qualifications, as these may change over time, but the expectation is these qualifications will remain constant for this current edition of the PMBOK Guide. We know the format of the exam. There are 200 questions. You need to score 61% to pass. Of the 200 questions, that means you need to get 122 right. Or if you're focused on the 175 that are scored questions, you need to get 106 of the 175 scored questions right to get the 61%. The PMP is a pass or fail exam. Scoring 61 or 62 or 63% is the same as scoring 95 or 96 or 97%. There's no PMP with honors, there's no PMP with distinction. There is simply PMP. 200 questions, 4 answers per question, multiple choice. You need to select the best answer because there may be more than one correct answer. And we know we need to have a broad understanding of project management. We need to have knowledge. We need to understand project management as defined in the PMBOK Guide. We need to have application. We need to be able to deal with situational specific questions, and we need to be able to do analysis. Given these facts and figures, often the analysis questions are going to be in the earned value and network area, but given these facts and figures, what is the appropriate project management conclusion? With all of this in hand, you're well prepared to go out to pass the PMP exam and become a project management professional. Welcome, new project management professional.
This concludes our nugget on the PMP exam and how to prepare for it. I hope this video has been informative for you, and thank you very much for viewing.